Hello and welcome to the Broad Street Hockey Podcast. I am your host, Ryan Gilbert, and I have a special episode today. Not joining me, it's not Joe D, it's not Steve. We have Maddie Campbell making her long-awaited return to the podcast here. How's it going, Maddie?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for joining me here for this prospect episode. And also, another prospect expert kind of here is Jacob Russell making his Broad Street Hockey Podcast debut. You may recognize him from the Rebuild Report, which I think we're much anticipated episode 2 coming up soon.
Yeah, we'll run it back soon. Good to be here. Nice to be around, talk some prospects, get closer to the season, right? So it's always fun to see what's going on, see what all the young guys have been up to over the summer, who's grown and was put on 30 pounds of muscle randomly.
Yeah.
So yeah, glad to be here and excited to talk about it.
Yeah, I was excited to have both of you on at the same time. I'm glad it worked out because this isn't a slight to anybody else, but like when the 25 under 25 rankings come out, there's a few other people, but I like to look at where you guys put guys and like, oh, who am I too high on? Who am I too low on? But I don't think I was too far off on anybody. I mean, the 15 to 25 guys, I was like, whatever. But most of the top players, we were all kind of in sync with.
Yeah, it's a total crapshoot in that range anyway.
Yeah, 15 to 25. I mean, any of those guys could do nothing, and they could also be, you could look up one day and they're on the third line, second line, right? So it's just how a lot of these guys' skill sets translates to the NHL, and it's hard to really tell when they're playing in lower competition. But yeah, I think we top 10. I think we have a pretty solid idea of who's there and who's going to be present in the future for the future. So.
Yeah, those are all the players like we've actually seen so far, or we know are going to be top prospects, so we can rank them there. I'll just get it out of the way now. Maddie, you were the only person to not put Matvei Michkov number 1. You had a defenseman from the University of Michigan number 1. Do you care to defend that take?
That's just my process. As soon as Michkov steps on the ice, game 1, he's number 1 on my list. But I can't put anyone number 1 on there until they've seen the NHL even for like 1 second.
That's fair enough. Yeah, I think Kelly last year also had Owen Tippett number 1, which turned out to be a decent conjecture there because he had a breakout year.
Yeah, I think the Tippett one that ended up very, very good for Kelly. I think she looks really good doing that one, picking Owen, and he has the breakout season. But I don't disagree with what Maddie's saying, right? You never know what Michkov's going to look like in his first year, right? And it's not like Cam York has been, or all these guys, in the top 5. They're all have contributed at the NHL level or look like they're about to. So, it's again, it's a crapshoot even in the top 5, right? So.
Yeah, I love Cam York games. I think he's a legitimate top pair defenseman right now for the Flyers and has room to grow. So I have no problem with him being up there in the top 2 or 3 there.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah,
you're allowed.
Yeah, whatever. It's fine. All right, top of the show here. Make sure you are subscribed to the Broad Street Hockey Podcast on Apple and Spotify. If you subscribe on one, subscribe the other one. It helps out the show, helps us out if you like what you're hearing. Also, make sure you subscribe on YouTube. All of our podcasts are going up there now. So we got this Flyperbole, we got the Fly Guys up there. So make sure you check it out and got some backfilled content that should potentially still be evergreen there. But all right, Thursday training camp open today. Not going to touch too much on that. More so looking back at rookie camp and the rookie games. Maddie, you were at Saturday's game. I think we all watched at least one of the games. Who were your kind of big 5 stars? I know you had that article you published earlier this week.
Well, Saturday was definitely the weird one. It seemed like everybody collectively ran out of gas a little bit. I mean, we've been talking a lot about how the Rangers drafting model for the back half of the drafts has just been like big. So the Flyers prospects didn't do like awesome in the physical matchup and kind of ran out of steam a little bit towards the end, but can't be mad about it. It's a rookie game. It's whatever. I mean, Michkov looked great in the first game. Luchanko stood out in ways that I think we expected, like skating well, keeping pace, also ways we maybe, at least I didn't expect. I was pleasantly surprised by how in the mix he was physically. I as not the biggest guy and one of the babies sort of the group. I thought that was kind of funny. Yeah, 𝙄𝙒𝙖𝙏𝙏𝙏𝙀𝙍 looked good. Andrae looked good. It's kind of like the guys you expected to be good in this camp are showing up, which I want to say, like, obviously is good, but like last year's rookie game, we had some guys that we expected to be good who weren't so good. So everybody's clearing the low bar this year. We're off to a good start.
That's what's important. It's like the guys that you think are going to do good did well. Like, yeah, you don't want to have any disappointments out there, especially in 2 games. You don't want people kind of overreacting to small sample sizes.
Yeah, I think just like Maddie was saying, right, with the Rangers and how big they play and how they like to play in their bottom 6, especially, and even in their farm system. You look at the guys who stood out for the Flyers, you know, and then the guys who are probably going to be more in the mix for an NHL job at some point. Andrae, 𝙤𝙏𝙏𝙏𝙀𝙏𝙏𝙏𝙏, even Alexei Gendron, who we're going to talk about in a minute, right? Who may have stood out. These guys aren't the biggest guys. They're not huge. They're not even necessarily, you know, an NHL stature at this point. So it's not really that surprising that they kind of got bowled over at times. But I think, you know, it's good to see the guys from Lehigh really show out and make it look like they belonged, at least on the ice, with players who may actually take a step towards the NHL next year, right?
Yeah, it's great to see that. I was happy to see 𝙏𝙏𝙏𝙏𝙏𝙏 keep up with Luchanko and Michkov in the first game there, because he was someone who's, you know, kind of got written off after a poor start in his AHL career last year. So, you know, maybe he's someone that can get that offensive touch back.
Yeah, he definitely needs it. I mean, he was great his first year. Last year completely fell off a cliff, and like I can't explain that. I have no idea what was going on there. So nice to see that he's at least getting off on the right foot here.
Yeah, he was somebody who last season, I know we at least at BSH were really high on, and there was some discussion around him, you know, maybe making the jump this season if he had a good year last year. But it just, as Maddie said, right, it was just bad basically all season from him. So if he can get that train back on track and maybe be a depth guy and try to take a step to be somebody who kind of leads the way for the Phantoms, I think that'd be a really good step for him in his career right now.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's tough to judge these guys, especially with the Phantoms roster right now, especially the past few years, how just bad it's been. So having like these guys come on trying to carry their own line in their first or second year as a pro definitely is going to, you know, take them down a notch.
Yeah, and I mean, for a lot of these guys who score a lot in juniors and then come into the pros and are expected to play more of a depth role, like that's a really big adjustment. I think that's something that 𝙤𝙏𝙏𝙏𝙏 talked about before last year's camp, is like he's got to kind of remodel his game to get settled into the role that would be expected of him at the pro level. And I think some people can expect that to be a lot smoother of a jump than it is, but it takes a lot of work.
Yeah, and especially with the Phantoms, if you really, you know, watch the AHL and look around the AHL, a lot of the times that the best way to kind of grow these guys and get them acclimated to the pro game is with other players who've been around for a longer time, playing in the AHL, playing even in the ECHL, right? Playing against grown men and really earning their stripes, right, over the years. Phantoms really don't have a ton of those guys. The experience isn't really there. Even in the coaching, you know, department, Lappy's not necessarily the most experienced head coach. So I think it's kind of tough to look at some of these guys and fully make any determinations on what they look like in the AHL. But yeah, I think this year should be a better year for the Phantoms. I think they should be able to hopefully at least have the guys who should stand out a little more.
Fingers crossed.
Mm.
Yeah, and like maybe that's something the Flyers can build toward, is like, because I'm thinking about it, they haven't really had any of those, like, you know, grizzled veterans down at the AHL level. Maybe they're building that now with the goodwill of, you know, building the culture and whatnot, and they'll get someone down in there in the AHL. But like they really haven't had any of those quad A guys that sometimes you see.
Yeah, and that just sometimes isn't even for the improving the play. It's just being in the room, being around, right? It kind of gives everyone more of a stabilizing force, right? Even to help with the transition. So
yeah, I think, yeah, but to switch to someone else here, I think a lot of us got our first eyes on this guy in the rookie series. We've heard a lot about him. Hunter McDonald. Hunter McDonald's been on Keith Jones's tip of his tongue for a while now. I was impressed with him, on Friday night, what I watched. It seemed he was willing to mix it up with the Rangers, and the Flyers needed someone out there to do that, to protect their guys. So, Maddie, what are your thoughts on Hunter McDonald so far?
I'm moving towards being cautiously optimistic about him. Frankly, with how Jones was talking about him last season, I was like, I don't get it. Like, I must be missing something because you guys are obsessed with him and I just don't see it. But I think he still has a lot of work to do, but he's getting more settled into sort of pro pace, pro game. Obviously, the physical element is there. It's working for him, but he's looking a little better in the neutral zone in terms of how he's moving the puck, a little more confident with his skating. Yeah, looking a little toolsy. We'll see what happens. I'm certainly not rushing him to the NHL, but like, he's getting there. I'll take that.
Yeah, he could be a guy. Jake, do you have any thoughts on McDonald?
yeah, he's like Maddie said, he needs some seasoning, right? He needs to really grow his game a bit more than just a guy who's big and will throw his weight around, right? But like Keith Jones was, he was saying it all last year throughout rookie camp and in the training camp, right? I think that's the type of guy that they want to bring through the system to have as a bottom pair guy. That's also why I think it's going to be a little more difficult for guys like Emil Andrae to really stick as a bottom pair guy, because I think the organization really has a sort of philosophy about wanting that big body back there, that homegrown guy who can really throw his weight around and stand up for himself. That's also why, Rasmus Ristolainen keeps seemingly entering the fold and keeps being, on the tip of everyone's tongue, even though he really didn't have much of an impact last year after a certain point, right? With his injury. I think they would like to bring a guy like that through their system and have him be a part of that sort of culture shift, right, that we've been talking about for the last couple of years or year and change since the new regime came in. Yeah, he's definitely going to need to grow, not maybe physically, but in his game. But yeah, he did look a bit better. The little bit I've seen of him at the rookie games, he did look like he belonged a bit more, and he's not just a big slug out there who's gonna just muck it up in the corners, right? So I think he's growing and he's getting better, but there's still a bit more runway to go there before we start talking about him as a Flyer.
Yeah, it seems like he can maybe fill that like Nick Steeler role, but like the Flyers just locked up Nick Steeler, so it would take an injury or a trade probably to get McDonald there in the lineup, which is probably similar to Emil Andrae, because he's probably, like you just alluded to, Jacob, is more of a top pair, top four guy that can maybe run a power play. Jumping ahead here a bit, who do you guys think of the rookie games besides Michkov will play the most games in the NHL this year? Will McDonald get a chance if there's a wristo injury? Will it be Andrae? Will it be 𝙏𝙒𝙖𝙏𝙏𝙏𝙏? Will it be Luchanko getting 9 games at the end of the year? Like what's going to be the outcome here?
I almost want to lean towards 𝙏𝙏𝙏𝙏𝙏𝙏, but I'm not exactly sure because, right, he didn't have a good time in Finland, right, before coming over to the Phantoms. He went from Finland's top division, he went down to the MST, and he was fine there, but he's playing against much more subpar competition. Had a decent time there, and then everyone sort of soured on him, even though he was a second round pick, right? But he came to the Phantoms and he looked good. He looked good in spurts. He had a much better season, I think, than a lot of people thought he would. And it's just that combination of speed and skill that intrigues me about him now. If he can make that translate to the NHL, I think the Flyers may have to lean more into the speed game on forward. They got a lot of quick skaters and not necessarily they don't have a ton of skill as it's currently constituted, right? There's not a ton of game breakers, but they do have guys, Konechny, Owen Tippett, obviously very quick. These guys are all fast, and if they can just really use that rush centric game that they really leaned on last year for basically all of their offense, 𝙄𝙏𝙗𝙏 might fit in with that. The only problem again is, you know, that fourth line. If he's going to sub in there, I think John Tortorella wants that to be more of a heavier or defensively centered line, and I don't know if he can necessarily play that role. Besides that, you know, Emil Andrae, he's going to get his games. I assume Ronnie Attard will get some games as well at some point this year, if there's injuries on the back end, which there always is. But yeah, I think one of those three for sure is going to get a decent cup of coffee. I'd probably say the defensemen probably have a better chance at breaking through. I think the forwards right now, I was looking at the projected line combinations up front earlier on today, and it looks like they're kind of set, you know, for the start of the year. It looks pretty solid. So it might be a bit difficult for somebody to break through from the Phantoms and make the team. And I doubt it'll happen out of camp, but we'll have to wait and see. You know, injuries always happen, and you never know if somebody makes a good impact, a good impression, they could stay up a bit longer.
Yeah, go ahead, Maddie.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I agree. I think the defensemen, Andrae, Attard, have the best chance, are the closest to NHL ready. The other thing with 𝙄𝙏𝙗𝙏 for me is, like, he kind of dropped off a bit towards the end of last season, and that did sort of coincide with when the Phantoms got hit with injuries, call-ups. He spent a lot of the early season playing with Lycksell and Lazinski. That line was fantastic, but then Lazinski got hurt, Lycksell got called up, 𝙄𝙏𝙗𝙏 really fell off. So there, for a while, there was that question of, like, how much is he himself being super impactful and good, and how much is it is driven by who he's playing with. And I know it's a give and take. Like, if you have Jacob Goucher as your center, like, you need, if you're trying to set people up, like, you need somebody to finish on your chances. But I think there's still some growth that he needs to figure out in terms of being, like, not just the third best player on his line. I don't think he's ever going to be, like, a super, like, the guy driving his line at the pro level, but I think if he could get a little bit closer to that, that would serve him pretty well. And we're still kind of waiting on that.
Yeah, I think the main issue with 𝙄𝙏𝙗𝙏 is going to be, like, the fit on the Flyers, because I've talked about all the time. The Flyers have top six wingers that are in the top 9, with Farabee and Brink being on that third line. So, I mean, it would probably be worst case scenario for 𝙄𝙏𝙗𝙏 to be caught up, because that means an injury to, you know, a Konechny or a Tippett or a Forster, someone in the top 6. Because I imagine if it's a bottom 6 injury, you know, that Farabee or Brink just moves up, and they call up a heavy body there for the fourth line. But yeah, do you guys think 𝙄𝙏𝙗𝙏 could be a guy the Flyers eventually move in a trade for a center? I'm also wondering, is he only comfortable on the right side, or does he also move to the left side sometimes?
I think it's mostly been the right side, but don't quote me on that.
Yeah, that's what the Flyers have a lot of. It seems like everybody just goes on the right side, and, like, Farabee is the only natural left winger.
Yeah, I mean, I only bring up 𝙄𝙏𝙗𝙏 because, again, the forward, you know, the possibilities of forwards really breaking through, I think we'll have to wait until the season to see who really, you know, stakes their claim, right? But going back to what you said, Ryan, about the trade, it's a possibility, right? Like, I mean, you're trading from a position of strength with the wingers, right? Especially with, like, middle 6-ish potential wingers. I think there's a lot of guys coming up through the system who are going to possibly fill that role. So I don't know how much 𝙄𝙏𝙗𝙏 would fetch in a trade package, right? I don't know who you'd be able to get for him, but, like, yeah, that would make sense if you wanted to at least get some sort of depth center play, even if it is just somebody who can fill in case of injury or play with the Phantoms, like Maddie said, you know, so we don't have Jacob Goucher on the first line halfway through the season. No offense to Jacob Goucher, but he's just, you know, that's just not necessarily ideal. But yeah, I think there's a definite possibility that happens, and I think there's definitely. I think there's a desire now to really start to clear out some of the guys that are going to end up maybe being in-betweeners, because there will be, there's Denver Barkey coming. There's other players still coming up through the ranks who look promising, right? So I think it would be good if they could sort of start to clear out who they don't think is going to eventually one day be a Flyer, and try to get some assets recouped for them. Because 𝙏𝙒𝙄𝙏𝙏𝙏𝙏, as I said, was a second-round pick, right? You'd like to get something for him, ideally.
Yeah, I think all it takes, he would be like the prospect, not thrown in, but like the prospect the Flyers might be more willing to trade than, a Bonk, obviously, or a Luchanko, or even maybe like a Jack Berglund, because they want a center. They don't necessarily need those wingers. So he could end up being the odd man out. Jake, I just wanted to applaud you for your opening line on your Ronnie Attard paragraph here. Attard has had so many cups of coffee with the big club at this point. It'd be surprising if he could even sit still. That really got me there. Yeah, he's had a lot of cups of coffee. He seems to be that guy called up to fill the role, maybe play that 7. So I'd like to see more of him, but just the back end. Erik Johnson's the 7. He's going to play games. He's not going to be the guy if there's an injury. So I guess Attard would probably be that guy if there were a nagging injury or someone out long term.
Yeah, no, when I was writing about Ronnie Attard, he's 25 now, right? Like same age as me. We're both old, apparently. That's just elderly now. So he's going to have to, if he's not going to find a permanent place here, another guy who you'd probably like to find him another landing spot, right, somewhere else. He looks good in the AHL. He's made an AHL All-Star game, but he has trouble translating that to the big club. And every time he comes up, he looks fine. He looks okay. He's not, murdering the play, right? He's not a disaster out there, but it's not anything that you'd really want to see more of whenever he comes up, and that's why he keeps yo-yoing back and forth. He's been passed, I think we can probably safely say, by Igor Zamula in that sort of 6, 7, 8 fourth pair type realm, right? So I think he's gonna have one of his last shots this year. He is going to be 26 by the time the season ends. And at that point, as a defenseman, as a guy who's been in the AHL for a long time, it's going to be hard for him to really, again, like Bonk coming up is going to demand some time and some more attention. And at a certain point, it's going to be Attard just shuffling further down the lineup, even in Lehigh Valley. So I think he's a big guy, 6'3", 207, right? He's a big guy. Another guy who I think would be more well suited for a third pair, in Keith Jones's sort of vision and Danny Briere's sort of vision of what they want that to be, in Tortorella's vision, even I think that they want that to be. But he hasn't necessarily had that jump after working with Brad Shaw like some of the other defensemen that we've seen. And I think it'll be interesting to see what he does this year. But he's got a bit of an outside shot at it right now. He's falling a bit further down the pecking order.
Yeah, Maddie, before you chime in, does he seem like the guy that would be happy playing that quad A, back and forth kind of veteran AHL role? Like obviously everyone wants to play in the NHL, but what, like, do you get any sense of that? Like he'd be okay sticking around in the Flyers or to kind of play that role?
Maybe. I mean, I don't have like a super good sense of that, but he seems pretty amenable. He's a nice guy. Maybe. What I was going to say though is I think this is the first year that he's waivers eligible. So like they would have to try and get him through waivers after training camp, beginning of the season. So I wonder how much that kind of forces their hand with the decision to keep him or send him down, like we saw last year with Zamula. I don't know.
Yeah. I always kind of thought Zamula was in that role of like, yeah, maybe the Flyers trade him to get a fresh start somewhere, but he's got that role locked up of Michkov's BFF, so he's going to be here for as long as Michkov, it seems like.
Yeah, no, I mean, and Addard again is another right shot defenseman that's in demand. If he, oh, I disappeared for a second there. If he can stick in the NHL, and provide some value, he could also be another guy who is a trade piece, right? If he can prove that he can really stay and be effective at the NHL level, it's just a matter of if he gets the chance to do so.
Yeah, the Flyers are going to have very few trade pieces at this deadline, given their pending free agents being, I think nobody pretty much except Ryan Johansson. So, yeah, but yeah, we're getting to that time of the year where waivers come up, and fans of their team thinks, oh, there's you can't waive this guy; he's going to get claimed. We saw that a bunch, but I think Adder would make it through. But yeah, being big and being a right hand shot does kind of increase his value a bit. Before we move on to players to watch in camp, we haven't really discussed Oliver Bonk at all, besides just Jacob mentioning his name. Maddie, was he not noticeable in a good way or not noticeable in a bad way, or did he just kind of like do what you expected out there?
I would say in a good way. He pretty much met expectations. I thought he was fine on Friday, from what I could tell on the terrible stream. And he did only play the one game as planned. Yeah, I mean, it seems like they're very pointedly not closing the door on him making a run at a roster spot. Obviously, we know what the numbers game situation is. But yeah, I think he's going to get a long look in training camp, and that's going to be an interesting one to watch. But so far, he's doing okay. Fine.
I didn't realize he only played Fridays. That's bad research by me.
Yeah, again with Bonk, just to add on to what Maddie said, he's not necessarily a stud offensive guy. Like, he's never really been that. He had a lot of points with the London Knights, but if you know the London Knights, everybody has a lot of points with the London Knights. The London Knights bludgeoned teams at times last year. Like, they killed people. So I'm not exactly shocked that in his only appearance he didn't necessarily stand out and in his first time playing in somewhat of a pro level. But yeah, I mean, he's going to have a bit of a runway here. He's going to have to grow a bit more. I'd be very surprised if he makes a run through camp to actually get at a roster spot. It seems a little far-fetched to me, but you never know.
Yeah, I feel like even if there was like an opening that he was fighting for and it wasn't, they already had 7, it would be hard for him. Because I feel like I'm becoming a Bonk hater a little bit, but it's more just like pulling the reins back because, like you said, he had a bunch of points. Just over half of them were on the power play. And the bumper role in juniors as a defenseman, I don't think that skill set is transferable to the NHL. So I think people are starting to overvalue him a bit, overhype him a bit. He can still be a very good two-way defenseman, but might not be the offensive guy that some people hope for.
Yeah, I mean, you might as well do it at the NHL level. I mean, power play's terrible as it is. Give it a shot. But I mean, he's in a very unique situation, and I got to see a lot of him at London last season, and he did look very good at times, but he's not overly dynamic right now. He's just somebody who's very steady in all 3 zones, does his job, and seems like a decent guy. So, I like him, big fan, and his dad played for the Senators, so that's cool.
Is that cool? Cool?
To some people.
Cool.
I don't have the Senators beef that some of our other co-workers do, but I don't really think about them that much.
The Senators, they're just so mid. They're just so mid. I can't care about them. Can't care.
His last name is just fun.
It is.
That'd be fun. I thought his dad was huge too. I thought his dad was hilarious to watch out there. Just this massive guy, this gangly dude, and his last name is Bonk.
I'm a big fan of gangly dudes. So
yeah.
All right, you guys. Any more thoughts on the rookie camp before we kind of switch gears here to players to watch in training camp?
I think we hit everything.
Yeah, I think we're all good. I did want to ask Maddie, just briefly, what did you think about the goaltending in rookie camp? Because that's going to be You know, how did anyone look? Did anyone stand out at all? We need somebody. I can't watch Cal Peterson again. Please, God, don't make me watch Cal again in net.
I mean, it was pretty much the Carson Bjarnason show, because like that's kind of all they've got right now. And like he was fine. I still don't really know if he's gonna be anything. Like he was pretty average in the WHL last season. I don't know, man. Like it's goalies. I'm not going to pretend like I'm an expert on that. Like he looked fine in the rookie games, which is good, I guess. But like he's going to go back to junior for another year, and we'll punt this down the road.
Yeah, I mean, it's just God. I can't watch Cal Peterson in the NHL anymore.
No, we can. We'll get into goalies more at the end of the show.
Oh, we will.
But yeah, going into training camp here, Jacob, you wrote in players to watch in camp article. You highlighted 4 players. Ronnie Adder, already went over him a bit. Semu Tuamala, and then 2 players I'm interested in him quite a bit. Massimo Rizzo, the Rizzler there, and then I got beef to pick with you if you think Bobby Brink is not making this roster. So.
I did read the comments for that. I probably should have been a bit more. I should have been a bit more clear about what I was trying to say. The only thing about I think Bobby Brink's an NHL middle 6 winger, 100%. Like knocked down. If you gave him a full 82 game season, I wouldn't even be surprised if he hit 45, 50 points, right? If you played him with the right 2 other players with him, right? Yeah. On the right line, give him maybe some PP2 time here and there. But it just seems like Bobby Brink is not exactly loved by this organization, especially by its head coach. It just seems like even when like he'd get scratched, and I'd watch the game that led to him getting scratched, or the plays that led to him getting scratched. I'm like, yeah, I mean, I guess, but he seems like he's getting picked on a lot. And if he does have a weak camp, I'm not saying that I would leave him off the roster. I would 100% have him on the team, on the third line, and I think he'd be perfect there. But at the same time, I think there is definitely there's a bit of doubt creeping into my mind about whether or not John Tortorella actually wants to keep him around.
Maybe he becomes the guy that, I'm pushing for a Zegras trade. Maybe he's the guy that they end up trading to Anaheim there. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. I don't know if I think it's good that they have Travis Konechny there, because he was kind of dealt similarly in his early years. Obviously, I don't think Brink's going to be nearly as good as Travis Konechny, but if Konechny can maybe mentor him a bit, and Brink like understands that he's the whipping boy for no reason, maybe Tortorella just wants to see that, just some tough love and see how he responds.
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of the case. The other thing that I think is hurting Brink as well, as we've even as he was coming up through the NCAA and played for Denver, same as Massimo Rizzo. He's not exactly the most dynamic skater. He's got a weird stride. It's not bad. I mean, he's not slow. He's not like, overly sluggish out there, but he's not a burner like Konechny is, right? And that small guy who's quick and flying around out there. It's a lot easier for a guy like Tortorella to see, him flying in on the forward check, doing the little things. And Konechny has a bit of snarl to him as well, right? He's a very unique player in that respect. And Brink hasn't necessarily developed that yet. So while I think that he's going to be, he should be a decent piece to this team, and maybe even, helping turn around that power play unit that has been so bad for the last 5 to 10 years. I think there's still some doubt creeping into my mind about whether or not he really gets the chance to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking a lot about Morgan Frost here, and how it's clearly very hard to get out of Tortorella's doghouse once you're in it, but it's possible. You just gotta crack the code, but it's not going to be an easy task for him, certainly. I still have a lot of belief in him too, but it's not going to be easy.
And the thing about Bobby Brink as well, just with the management, I don't think if Tortorella went up to Keith Jones and Danny Briere and the whole, brain trust of management and said, I don't want Bobby Brink anymore, I don't know how willing the management will be to like put their foot down and fight for Bobby Brink in the way that it seemed like they maybe did for Morgan Frost at times, right? Because Frost is a position of need. They need that skilled center. Again, as we've been saying, they do have a lot of wingers, middle six wingers potentially around. So I like him. I do like Bobby Brink. I hope he has a full 82 game season and does great. But, you know, there's still some doubt there. And, you know, you always need to add somebody in who gets people talking about it every now and then.
Yeah. And never read the comments, but you know, it's good to see a lot
I
of
don't
comments.
usually,
Just don't read them. But yeah, Brink's the guy that would be squeezed out, because like other wingers are either top prospect Michkov, big contracts, Konechny, Tippett, Farabee, making $5 million, and Forster. He's not going to get out of the penthouse. I don't seem like it's just the way he plays the game. He's going to be in the top 6, top line, no matter what. So Brink is that guy. And, you know, maybe it takes 𝙏𝙒𝙖𝙏 having a great camp like Brink did to force the Flyers' hand. But yeah, it's, I don't think the Flyers would risk Brink going to waivers, and they're already carrying Nick Delorier as their extra forward. So tough to find anyone that can get that spot there. But I do want to talk about Massimo Rizzo, because I feel like he's someone played 3-4 years. 3 years of college. So he's 24, 23 now. So he's someone that could maybe come in and fight for one of those bottom 6 spots.
Yeah, I mean, again, not necessarily. You look at the projected lines. So if I look at the projected lines right now it's got Noah Cates, Ryan Poehling, and Garnet Hathaway as the 4th line. I have no problem with that. I'm sure John Tortorella would love that. Scott Laughton could also be bumped down, Cates up, whatever, sort of configuration you want to put there. But Rizzo's just interesting to me because he did have those 3 years at Denver. He did look good all 3 years. He had a bit of an injury in, I believe it was February, halfway through the season, and then came back against Boston University and Boston College, and helped Denver to beat them, win the NCAA championship, right? So he's had some good years at Denver. I don't necessarily, again, he's not a big guy. He's not necessarily going to be a scorer right out the gate, but he's ready. You know, he's got the seasoning, he's got the age. This is going to be his year to compete for a job. And I think he's probably somebody who would do more of the little things that would be more conducive to being a bottom sixer than, as we stated, like someone like 𝙏𝙏𝙏𝙏𝙏, who would still need to learn how to do that at an NHL level, right? I think he'd be coachable. I think there's not any bad words to say about Massimo Rizzo from his time at Denver. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what he does coming into camp. Those college guys, those upperclassmen are always interesting to see what type of chance they get. But yeah, I don't think he's going to start with the team, but if there's injuries, he could, and he starts well with the Phantoms, he could make an appearance here and there.
Do you think he's someone that can stick at center at the NHL level, or is he more likely to switch to wing?
I'd imagine that he'd probably play wing. I'd imagine that he'd probably end up playing wing. Yeah, I think he's probably more of a winger, especially how the team's currently constituted. I think you'd rather have Laughton, Cates, or Poehling play those bottom 6 center roles before you put Rizzo there, right? I think he's one of those guys, if, Garnet Hathaway goes out, Bobby Brink, or one of the top 6 wingers, maybe he can fill in there and do a job for a short period of time, and then we see where he can go from there. Maybe sticks around.
Yeah, Maddie, who do you think Rizzo could play with for the Phantoms? Like, will he be with a 𝙏𝙏𝙏𝙏𝙏 and like a Desnoyers? Will there be a more responsible winger with him and maybe another youngster?
I don't know. I think I'd like to see him with 𝙏𝙏𝙏𝙏𝙏. That could be interesting. I want to back up for 1 second though. Something I've been thinking about is like, we keep talking about like how not great the numbers game is with the NHL roster to start the season, but something that Briere talked about in his availability on Tuesday, forgot what day today was for a second there, was that how last year they really went into camp with Allison and Lazinski penciled into their lineup, and Brink and Forster just flat out outplayed them, outworked them, and they had no choice but to give them spots with the team to start camp. And I think that's really interesting, telling perhaps that they're still kind of keeping the door open for a lot of guys and putting the pressure on for some of these youngsters as well. It's going to be interesting, I think.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that he said that, but with all due respect to Tanner Laczynski and Wade Allison, I don't know if the Flyers have one forward on the roster that's kind of that low. And like Poehling is, I don't think he's going to be sent down, and like maybe if Brink really disappoints, him in the top 9 gets sent down. But
I think that's kind of mostly what he was alluding to.
The messaging is like Bobby
Brink has to have a good camp. Forster has to have a good camp because he's not a lock in their mind. Like he could be. If he's outplayed, like they'll send him down.
That would be absolutely insane to me. Absolutely.
I agree. But
Forster to me was the guy who, if I didn't put Michkov as one, I probably would have put Forster as one. I'm very high on Tyson Forster coming out of the draft. I don't even think they'd send Brink down, right? I think he's another guy, right? If you wanted to get a center, if you trade for an equivalent sort of player who just plays center, maybe someone a little bit worse just because of the positional value, right? Of being a center. But yeah, I find it hard just to see who gets knocked out, right? Because Garnet Hathaway is here. Garnet Hathaway's playing fourth line, and I like Garnet Hathaway as a fourth liner. I think he's one of the better fourth liners you can have. He's played in the playoffs. He's played for good teams. He's played for bad teams, and he seems like a good guy to have around the locker room. Poehling definitely could have been on the hot seat if he didn't have such a solid year last year. He really got a lot of leash from Tortorella. He was playing in overtimes, which is insane, but at the same time just shows how much Tortorella believed in him, and for good reason, right? Because he did look poised, and he did look very good. And Noah Cates, obviously, Scott Laughton's going to be in the lineup for the majority of the time. He could get scratched, but he's obviously not going anywhere off the roster. So that's the only blockade I see there for guys like Rizzo and even 𝙄𝙏𝙏𝙏𝙏𝙏. But yeah, I think they definitely want to foster a sense of competition throughout camp for places, even if like I can't see them sending Forster down. Like, what is he going to do in the AHL? I can't see it, but no, you never know.
Yeah. I mean, they've built up some goodwill this offseason. I mean, Luchanko pick's looking better. Michkov's over here, and like sending Forster down would just completely ruin all of that. As you were talking about Bobby Brink as a potential trade chip, I remembered that he's from Minnesota, and Marco Rossi is potentially on the trade block. So that could be something to keep an eye on there. I'm not hearing it quite yet, but just hearing some rumblings.
See, I'm hearing that you're hearing.
Yeah, everyone's hearing something.
You're hearing whispers. We're hearing whispers.
The Rossi thing is always just popping up here and there. I don't know. It seems like a decent fit. It does seem like it makes logical sense. Like Brink 𝙄𝙏𝙏𝙏𝙏 for Rossi. In my head, if you put it at NHL 24, maybe.
What if you put in Chuck Fletcher's trade app? Do you think that would go through?
No, you'd have to give up. You have to give up Konechny, I think.
The Wild would have to call him and be like, Chuck, put this in your app. Let me know what it says.
Well, it depends if Chuck Fletcher is the GM of the Wild or of the Flyers.
That's an excellent point. 2 franchises he has ruined over the past decade plus.
Well, he hasn't ruined them. He just made them very below average hockey teams.
Yeah, not ruined, just stuck
not
in that.
Horrible, just almost worse than horrible, actually, I would say.
Yeah, because if you're horrible, you're at least getting top picks consistently.
Yeah, the Sharks look great right now.
Yeah, definitely there.
2 players on the Sharks look great right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else players camp to watch? I think we went over Brink, went over Adder, 𝙄𝙏𝙏𝙏𝙏𝙏, Rizzo seem to be the 4. Do we actually think Bonk can compete for a spot, or do we think they're just saying that so there's that sense of competition? Like, if he goes out in the preseason and balls out, like, will he just be one of the final cuts, or will he potentially make the roster, or would it have to be an injury?
I mean, he might be one of the last cuts, but even like listening to him, even back to development camp, like it seems like he knows that he's not realistically competing for a spot. He's going to try really hard. He's excited about it, but like he knows what the deal is.
Yeah, I can't see that necessarily happening. I don't even know if it would be good for his development, right? For him to just go straight to the NHL. But if he has a great camp, he's got the good thing with 𝙏𝙒𝙄𝙏𝙏𝙏𝙏, and also the reason why when he was drafted, it was kind of a lukewarm selection, right? The good thing is he is pretty well-rounded. He has a pretty even game. It's not too flashy. He's not going to make a ton of mistakes. You never know if that's going to translate to the NHL level and just makes a ton of mistakes. But he you know, he's not going to be a guy like Emil Andrae, who sometimes you watch and you're like, oh God, that was rough. So I don't think it'll happen. But yeah, I think like what Maddie said, I think if he has a great camp, he'll be one of the last cuts, just if not to kind of push other defensemen, just to reward him for having a good camp, right?
And I think it's valuable to keep him around a little longer, just working with the NHL group. Can't hurt, right?
Yeah. No. Yeah, and looking at the Flyers' schedule, like their first 9 games are set up where they have 2 back-to-backs. They have a few. They don't have a 3 and 4, but like they got 2 back-to-backs with travel. Like that's a good enough excuse to be like, all right, we're going to keep this kid around, give him 9 games, see what happens. Maybe only if there's an injury, but like I could still see them doing that because they start with the back-to-back. There's a back-to-back home and home with the Capitals as their 7th and 8th games or so. So I could see them doing something like that given their schedule early on.
I like your optimism.
Yeah. That'd be really cool.
It would be really
fun.
Cool. It would be fun. Yeah. I would enjoy it.
What do you guys think if the Flyers were being competitive this year and the rebuild was truly over? Do you think 𝙏𝙒𝙄𝙏𝙏𝙏 and/or Luchanko would make this team? Like it's not we recognize it's not good for their development, but like, do you think they could play top half of the lineup and have a successful year?
No, not yet.
Not really. No.
Yeah.
I don't.
Sorry.
No, I mean I don't think so either. I mean,
maybe 𝙏𝙒𝙏𝙏𝙏. Maybe I'd probably have more faith in 𝙏𝙒𝙏𝙏 than Luchanko, just because I'd like to see Luchanko go back. The Guelph team he played for stunk. He was not playing with good players. Yeah. I'd like to see him go back and dominate, and then you know have that build into next season, where hopefully then he can compete for a spot. I think that's his track to making the NHL.
And he's so young still.
He is, and he's not big. He'll probably try to put on some weight throughout the year and things like that. You know, classic hockey not mannerisms, but just talking points. Just put on weight and stuff. Yeah, mannerisms. But yeah, I'd probably actually say 𝙏𝙒𝙏𝙏𝙏 would have a better chance of succeeding than Luchanko right now, because I don't know exactly what role Luchanko would play. I don't think he's good enough to be a third line center like right now to start the year or even halfway through the season.
Yeah. No, that makes complete sense. I was hoping one of us would have a hot take. Like, yeah, I don't think it would make sense for any of them, even if the Flyers were competing. But do we think Luchanko, or wait, Jacob, as our CHL expert, do you know if the Guelph Storm are going to be any better this year? Because I don't know how that works. If I know there's trades and like drafts and shit, but
yeah, I doubt it. Like, honestly, the thing about Guelph is they just didn't have a lot of drafted players. So a lot of what ends up happening in the CHL in particular is you go throughout a season and anybody who is decent on an underperforming or just a bad team, decently drafted, they'll end up going to London, Kitchener, whoever's competing that year. So I would almost, if the Storm are bad again this year, I could see a world where Luchanko ends up getting traded in one of those massive trades that if you've ever seen the OHL trade graphics where they trade 15 first-round selections for Jett Luchanko and a backup goalie, I could see that happening, and then he maybe goes somewhere where he can play with some better talent around him. But this year he was stuck. You know, it wasn't great, and he still looked pretty good. So I don't think they'll be leaps and bounds better. I don't think it'll be hard for them to be worse, because at least on forward they were pretty rough. But yeah, I'm interested to see if he maybe ends up somewhere else, if he has a good start to the year and a team that's contending for the Memorial Cup, whether it be in the OHL, WHL, QMJHL, if they want to maybe take a swing at him and try to get an impact piece for their playoff push, maybe that happens. And I think that'd be where you'd really want to tune in and see how he performs alongside guys who are more his skill level, his potential skill level, at least.
Yeah, I remember that happening with Konechny. I forgot if it was Sarnia at Ottawa or the other way around, but Konechny got traded in the middle of his amazing season there. Also the Germ, I think, played for a few different CHL teams after he came over. So two premier Ron Hextall Flyers prospects there.
The Germ.
The Germ. I am a disease. Okay, so Luchanko at the end of the year, obviously, if he's with Guelph, he'll probably have a chance to come to the NHL if the Flyers choose to do so. Do we think the Flyers will definitely do that? Like, as long as Luchanko has a good season, will they do that no matter what? Will they do that if they're out of contention? Will they do that if they're in a playoff race? How do we feel about Luchanko potentially getting those 9 games at the end of the year?
It feels more likely that they'd stick him with the Phantoms at the end of the year, just because that seems to be how they always handle it. Could happen, though. I don't know.
I could see maybe if the Flyers are out of it, just to like see him and Michkov together for a few games. I wasn't sure if they could put him in the AHL. Steve mentioned that last show, and I was like, is that possible? He's like, I don't know.
They could do like an amateur tryout situation, I think, something like that.
Yeah, that probably makes more sense if the Flyers aren't mathematically eliminated. But we'll see, I guess.
I'll take a swing at a little bit of a hot take here, I guess. I think it'd be cool if he had a good year in the OHL, and if they were out of it, I think if they're in a playoff push, I don't think he comes up. I don't think he gets a chance. And even if he did, I don't think Tortorella would play him, right? I think we can all agree that he probably wouldn't play him. But I think if they're out of it, those last 9 games, and he has a good year, why not give him a little shot, see what it is, see what you can have Luchanko and Michkov in the same lineup together, and maybe, just put him on a power play 2 for a couple games or something if he really looks like he belongs. But it is far-fetched, right? It's not necessarily, he's not going to be ready for the NHL by the end of this year, but I think it's a possibility if they're out of it that he could make a little cameo at the end of the season, because I think he does have some more NHL ready qualities than maybe was initially thought, when he was drafted, right? It was people were pretty down on the pick when Luchanko was taken, right? I like Luchanko a lot. I liked him in the draft, but I just thought it was a bit early with that selection to take him. But I think he's improved his stock just off of people kind of watching how he plays, watching what he does, right? Out there on the ice again with guys who aren't necessarily the best, partners beside him. So I think if they're out of it, give him a shot, and he might show something that's pretty impressive at the end of the year, and then he can go into next training camp and say, I'm competing for the 3C role. I'm competing for XYZ, right? I'm really going to try and make this stick for next season. So I think that would be positive for him if he got a shot. Not necessarily sure if that'll happen. And I think if all goes right, the Flyers will be close enough to the playoffs where it probably won't end up happening.
Yeah. I think they should give him NHL time at the end of the year, just because this coming off season is so big. They have those 3 picks. They want to see if he is potentially NHL ready in training camp, or if they have to maybe go out and get a veteran center on a short deal. And looking at their schedule, like the OHL season ends March 23rd. After that, the Flyers play the Canadiens and Sabres twice. They play the Blue Jackets. They play the Senators. Including the final 3 games of the year is Ottawa, Columbus, Buffalo. So if they're out of it, those are going to be teams that are also out of it probably. And you can maybe get Luchanko in there for a few.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Wanting to see him just to gauge where he's at, so they know where they're at heading into the offseason.
Yeah.
I hadn't really thought about that.
Yeah, because next offseason it's it. You have 6 picks in the top 50. Maybe they make a trade at the deadline if they're semi-buyers to make a hockey trade or whatever. But yeah, next off season is going to be a big pivotal point. All right, the Flyers' biggest question in the Athletic article this week came out on Wednesday is, we've been talking about it a lot this summer. Who plays with Michkov? Who do you guys think is going to be his center? Who's going to be his winger? Do you have some? What do you think the rotation is going to be?
Yeah, I wrote about this actually probably about a month ago. Personally, for me, I really like the idea of a Forster, Frost, Michkov trio. And then you kind of have two sort of 1B lines, with the other one being Tippett, Couturier, Konechny. I like the fact that the interplay, the potential interplay between Frost and Michkov, it's intriguing to me, right? I would like those two playmaking minds together. And, Forster also, if he didn't start so poorly, his goal totals would have looked a lot better. He was so snake bitten to start the year. I think he can become a real finisher, and he's also a really good two-way player. He's developed into a guy who has some decent two-way responsibility. And, Morgan Frost, while he's not as bad as, some people would like to believe in his own zone, he's not amazing either. So having Forster there is good with, keeping that a bit of two-way responsibility on the wing, at least if you're not going to have the center be Couturier, who is obviously the more defensively minded guy. The only reason I'd kind of want Michkov with Frost instead of Couturier is that I'd like to see if Couturier can keep up with those guys, like his foot speed. He's been banged up. He didn't look great at times last year. Sometimes last year he looked bad offensively. His defensive game is still there. He's still going to be a very solid, a very solid two-way player, more than likely if he's healthy. But you stick him in between Tippett and Konechny, you got two guys with speed playing alongside Couturier, and they can sort of do their own thing. And Couturier, he can get to the front of the net, play in his own zone, and be very responsible and kind of let those guys run wild. But going back to Forster, Frost, Michkov, I think that has the potential to where you look up in the middle of the season, you're like, oh, wow, these guys are like way better than we thought they were. Like they're way more dynamic. And I think the Flyers need that bit of dynamic sort of push. I'm not necessarily like Forster versus Tippett. I think Tippett would also be good on that left wing. So that would be Tippett, Frost, Michkov. That sounds like a great line to me as well. I just like that added two-way viability of Forster alongside Frost and Michkov. And then you can all have those guys at the same time grow together, all pretty young. I think they're all under 24. Frost maybe 24. I think he's for 24.
Well, he wasn't in the 24 and 25. He's 20,
oh no, yeah, so he's 25.
He's an old man by this point.
Yeah, he's with me. Yeah. He's old now. So either way, have all those guys grow together, and hopefully you have that line for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, hopefully, and you can build into that. I like Frost, Forster, Michkov as a line personally.
Yeah, I do remember that now reading your article back, and I'm scrolling through it here. And you had Tippett, Frost, Michkov. So I was going to ask you what makes you change to Forster, but yeah, I think you're also included in this. Yeah,
it's tough, man. It's really tough. Yeah, Frost is 25. Yeah, he turned 25 in May. Yeah, so it's tough because Tippett, you can really see. I think my argument probably in that article was Tippett has that booming one-timer if he can really get it off, and Michkov would really like to play with that sort of speed. It's iffy both ways. I'm still not entirely convinced either way. I think more what I want is that Frost Michkov duo. I want to see those two together. And I like Frost more as Michkov center than Couturier.
Yeah, I think your argument also was that you wanted Coots and TK to stay together because they have some chemistry. But yeah, for sure. I think no matter what, he's going to put Couturier with Michkov just to put that two-way center there. But what do you think, Maddie?
I agree. At least to start the season, I would understand why they would want to staple Michkov to 𝙏𝙬𝙎 just to kind of insulate him defensively a little bit. But no, I agree with Jacob. I think putting him with Frost and maybe Forrester would be your most dynamic potential situation. And I'd like to see them work up to that. But I think it might take him being babysat a little bit to earn Tortorella's trust. He's got to work up to that a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely thought that was going to be the case, right? I would prefer Frost just out the bat to just see what we can do. Just play offense. Just let him eat 10 games, start of the season, and just let the guys go and see what they can do. The Tippett-Forrester debate really is interchangeable. I think they'd both be good on that side. But I think if you're putting Michkov with 𝙏𝙬𝙎𝙏𝙏, it probably makes more sense to put Tippett there, right? Sure. But again, does it really matter? They're both, I love Forrester and Tippett both, right? So it's not necessarily like, I think they'd both be good players, dynamic players to have alongside a guy like Michkov, who really has great on-ice vision. And when he's playing with good players alongside him, he is very dynamic. So,
yeah, I kind of want to see a Konechny, Couturier, Michkov line, but I don't know if they're going to move Konechny to the left side, and it probably also makes more sense to have Konechny and Michkov on separate lines. So, yeah, it'll come down to I think they'll want Tippett and his speed with Michkov, but I could also see the two-way game of Forrester. I think they're going to mix and match. We know Torch does that, so it doesn't really matter. I mean, everyone's going to read way too much into whatever the first training camp lines are. So I'm excited for that coming up next week.
Can't wait.
Yeah.
It's always good.
You guys got anything else, or you want to dig into the goalie stuff now?
Must we?
Yeah, let's get goalie.
I think
let's get goalied.
I talked about it with Steve on Monday before Briere came out on Tuesday and basically said Kolosov wants an NHL job. We're not going to guarantee him that. And then I believe it was Cole who wrote a great article on, does he deserve an NHL job, compared it to Fedotov and all his numbers there. And I'll give you guys the floor first, because I've talked about this already this week. But how are you guys feeling about Alexei Kolosov?
I'm tired of hearing about it. I'm over it.
He's not that good. He's not good enough to whine about this much.
Or at least we don't know. I mean, I'm sure he thinks he's good enough that he should walk into this NHL job. But, I don't know, dude. Everybody's got to prove it pretty much, right? Unless you got shipped off to Siberia to do military service, then we can talk about maybe being handed a job. Otherwise, come on, man.
Yeah, I mean, with Kolosov versus Fedotov, because Urson's obviously going to be one of the two. Fedotov is older. He's earned that chance, I think, a bit more than Kolosov. And really, man, 907 save percentage in the KHL. All right, sure. That's fine. But it's not a 22-year-old immediately getting an NHL job locked in. That's not to say that he could, necessarily come up in the middle of the season if Fedotov starts poorly, which is a distinct possibility, right? That could totally happen. If you don't want to wait in Lehigh Valley for just a little bit, bide your time with the Phantoms and then see how everything shakes out, you can't really sweat about it that much. I would have liked to see Kolosov in the AHL, see what he could do, see how he played. But if he's not going to cooperate, I mean, what are you really going to do? Fedotov has earned, with what he's been through, especially as Maddie just brought up, he's earned the right to at least get another shot at it. I don't even really take much stock from his appearances last year with the Flyers, because it was such a weird and just absolutely insane situation. He had wasn't his glove not here when he showed up with the Flyers, or he's missing equipment.
He had none of his gear.
He was missing equipment. He had an all white everything on. He just looked like somebody like went up to had a beer league game and they had to call a rent-a-goalie, and he just showed up, and it's just this hulking guy in the net, and he looks so just uncomfortable. So I think it was always, if they weren't going to acquire a goalie, it was always going to be Fedotov as the backup, and I think that's going to continue. And it's unfortunate that 𝙏𝙏 probably won't be a part of the team, this upcoming year, it seems like. But what are you going to do, really? Like, what are you going to do? There's no real justifiable reason to have him in the NHL right away. There just isn't.
Yeah,
I can see him being a little bit upset that Fedotov got those starts in the NHL. Maybe he thought it would be him, but like you guys said, everything he went through, he's older, he has better KHL numbers, they're paying him more. He gets the NHL time. Fight for a spot in the AHL, and then you'll be the number 3 goalie, and very likely be caught up at some point.
Yeah, I mean, we're not that far removed from this team having to use 6 goalies in a season. Like, he was gonna get time. Like,
if Rob Zepp got time once upon a time, you were gonna get a chance. Like,
they used 4 last year with Peterson and Sandstrom, both get shit in the bed.
Yeah. Like, and even in the KHL, Fedotov's playing for CSKA Moscow. Like, that's one of the premier franchises. It just makes sense that he got, the call. Like, it's not necessarily fair to 𝙏𝙏. I could agree with that. I can see why you'd be upset about it, but that's kind of just what it is. He did have, like Ryan said, he did have better numbers, and he's 27. Like, he is ready to go. This is his make or break time. So yeah, there's really nothing more to say about it, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm projecting a little bit, but I felt like watching Briere's presser, like, he was just so holding himself back from saying, like, man, you got to grow up. Like, that's hockey. Like, you're going to be a little bit homesick. You have to work your way up. Like, it is what it is, man.
Yeah, I saw someone in the comments of the Briere quote you put together, Maddie, that was saying maybe it was the money situation, because his AHL salary is like $80K, and in the NHL it's like $800K. Maybe that's a different argument. We should be paying AHL players more, but like, I saw that the person said the KHL salary cap is like 10 million. So I don't know how much 𝙏𝙏 is making over there. Maybe more than 80K, probably, but like, the path is there, and he just seems like he's like, oh, I want to stay over in Russia one more year to develop, one more year. It's like a little kid asking to play one more video game. After this game, I'm going to get off. No, after this game, it's like come on, he's not good enough. He's not good enough for us to be wasting all of our attention, everyone yelling on Twitter, wasting our breath on podcasts and stuff. Like, sure, maybe he can be good, but no, it's like we saw with the Askarov situation, how goalies can be. And I wanted to ask you guys about that, like, because Pierre LeBrun reported that the Flyers were in on him. Do you guys think they included one of these 3 goalies in the offer? Do you think like, which prospects, if any, do you think they maybe offered up for Askarov?
I mean, you'd think they would have had to have offered up one of the goaltenders. I have no idea who it would have been, but like, you would think it would have to be one, right? But I don't know.
Yeah, I think it may have just been a situation, maybe a pick centric sort of deal. I think more so than prospects. But yeah, I'd imagine you'd probably offer up, hey, you do want one of these goalies? We have some young guys, even somebody deeper in the system like Bjarnason or something like that. Maybe could have happened. It just makes sense to trade a prospect goalie for a prospect goalie, fill that role down in the AHL for the departing Askarov. But like, yeah, I don't even know. They could very well have never been a real formal offer, right? I think the Flyers easily could have matched that package if they really felt like it. But again, Askarov is intriguing, but it's not like he's proven at the NHL level, right? So you never know. He is a little unorthodox at times. He is a little all over the place. I like him. He's fun to watch. He's a very interesting guy. But yeah, I mean, I honestly don't even know if it reached a concrete, like we're comparing this offer to this offer stage. I really don't necessarily 100% believe that.
Yeah, and LeBron also reported that it seemed like the Predators were particularly interested in David Edstrom, who's a center, and the Flyers just they don't have any centers of that level to trade. Like, I feel like Kolosov could have been in that package, and like the Predators could have just let him play out this year in the KHL, and then next year maybe fight with Wedgwood for a backup job or go to the AHL. But I don't know. I don't think they would have. Thomas's article about why they won't trade for Askarov just made a lot of sense. They believe in Ursin. They had all these resources to get Throtoff over. But yeah, like you said, Jacob, he is a character, Askarov. I didn't realize until after the trade that he was the goalie that did that bench press celebration with the net. So yeah, I would have loved to see it's good to see the Flyers at least be in on that, because they know they need a goalie, and that's a position where you have to take that big swing. So I was happy to see them just be interested.
Yeah, it's nice to see that they know where their weaknesses lie, right? Like you said, Predators end up wanting a center. Not really gonna be anybody. I mean, Jack Berglund, but that's it, right? We're really grasping at straws at that point, right? So really unproven guys, and Edstrom looks pretty good. Could probably better than what the Flyers offered, and I think that's about it.
Yeah. All right, this has already gone over 70 minutes here. It's a lot longer than I expected. You guys have anything else you want to touch on here before we close things out?
Feeling very chatty today, apparently.
Yeah, great. It's awesome. No, I think I think I'm good. I think I'm pretty much said all I had to say. I think I'm exhausted all of the limited knowledge I believe I have, and we can wrap it up.
All right, Matt, are you good?
Yep, I've completely emptied out my brain.
Right.
You guys got it all.
I don't need to talk anymore.
Yeah, well, I definitely appreciate you guys joining me. I hope to have you guys back on again. For the listeners, make sure you subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, broadsthockey.com. Like and subscribe on there as well. Should be plenty of training camp content. We got the preseason kicking off this weekend. Also, of course, shout out Bet Online for sponsoring us here. All right, Maddie, thanks for joining us. Where can people find you?
I guess technically on Twitter, but like not really on Twitter.
Yeah.
I'm not on there. broadstreethockey.com.
Have you ventured to Blue Sky yet? Or again?
I downloaded it. Again, I'm not like using it.
No,
I'm the worst with this stuff.
Yeah, you were never a big tweeter anyway, besides potentially on your burner account that we discovered.
Oh yeah.
Jacob, where can the people find you?
I will be returning to Twitter. I have taken a hiatus. I got a little too fed up with the discourses on the For You page, so I had to take a break. But I will be back at Russell_28_. I believe that is what my @ name is. I can almost remember, but yeah, I'll be on there starting soon. I'll be back on there, kind of just sharing my thoughts about the season, and obviously BSH.com. We'll have some more articles coming soon, thick and fast, as the preseason starts. And we, start rolling, man. Should be an interesting season. I think the team has a chance to be a bit more intriguing than maybe we would have thought at the end of last year. So,
yeah. Definitely. All right, you guys can follow me on Twitter at @RGilbertSOP. I did just re-download Blue Sky. I'm giving it a chance. I think I'm just Ryan Gilbert on there, so you can find me there. Make sure, of course, you follow Broad Street Hockey at BroadStHockey on Twitter, on Instagram, or on TikTok now for some of these clips. So make sure we're joining all the new sites here. So make sure you guys get on board. All right, until next time, thanks for listening.